The Joe Rogan Experience.
Have you looked into any of the connections between ancient religions and psychedelics, like any of the John Marco Allegro stuff?
Yeah, I did. I didn't go that deep into it. I went in deep enough to know that there are a lot of very serious scholars, and Allegro is one, and Carl Ruck is another, and Gordon Wasson, the guy who kind of brought psilocybin to the West, who I write about at some length in the book, really believe that it was experience of psychedelics, which has been in culture for thousands of years. We know, whether you're talking about the Amazon or Africa, and that these experiences may have nurtured the religious impulse. You know, where do you get the idea of a beyond? Where do you get the idea of a heaven or a hell, if not from some altered state of consciousness? You know, people talked about visiting the underworld in Homer's time. So how did they do that? Was it dreams? Dreams don't have the authority that psychedelic experience has. There's something about psychedelic experience that has this. It's not just an opinion. It's not a fantasy. It's something real. It's objective truth. This is William James called it the noetic quality of the mystical experience, and that certitude comes from psychedelics. And so it seems totally plausible to me that at the very earliest stages of humanity, if people were indeed taking psychedelics, this might explain how they came up with these ideas. There are other alternative theories, and it's not provable. I just don't know how we would begin to prove it, but it seems plausible. And, you know, the ancient Greeks had a psychedelic that they used, we think, they called it the kykeon, Kykeon. And they had an annual ritual ceremony, and it was the only time in the year where you could use this drug. And it was a ritual for Demeter and harvest or planting time, and everybody in Greek society did this. And people, it was secret. It was called the mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries. And you weren't supposed to talk about it, but there's a few accounts around, and people talked about visiting the underworld, making contact with the dead. And Carl Ruck, who's a classicist at BU, says that was a psychedelic potion. We don't know what they were using, whether it was mushrooms or something else. The Greek use of drugs is very obscure. They only talked about wine. But the way they describe what wine did to you, there was clearly something added to it, that they were adding other plant drugs to their wine. Because they would have these tiny little glasses and they'd take these big trips. So we don't know what it was. Yeah.
Tiny glasses of wine.
Tiny glasses. And they were very careful about when you used it. And you know, people would completely lose control. And it was just like, no, this isn't wine. This is something
crazy.
else. Yeah,
so
it is.
Some sort of a psychedelic from grapes or added to it?
Well, I mean,
we don't know.
Some people, Albert Hofmann, who discovered LSD or invented LSD, he thought it was ergot, that they'd figured out a way. Ergot is a fungus that grows on grain, and it was the precursor chemical to LSD comes from ergot, and ergot is responsible for episodes of mass delirium in European history. You get a really wet year, the ergot grows on the rye, people eat bread made from it, and they go crazy. Some people think the Salem witch trials came after a wet year, and people had absorbed, these women had eaten ergot and were having visions and things like that, which was interpreted as witchcraft, which to them was a very...
I thought they were saying that the men had absorbed it and thought they were under spells.
Oh, maybe that too. I just
probably everybody's tripping.
Yeah. So anyway, so
they think
the thinking is if you just eat ergot, you're not going to be. You could get gangrene. It's not a clean chemical. And but the thinking of Gordon Wasson and Carl Ruck, and they were collaborators on this theory, was that the Greeks perhaps had figured out a way to derive a purer chemical from ergot that could be made into something very much like LSD. But again, nobody has succeeded, and they've tried for the last 20 or 30 years to take ergot and make something, you know, through simple processes that the Greeks could have mastered. So it may have been a mushroom. You know, there's a lot of psychedelic plants out there. It's one of the mysteries of evolution that, you know, DMT is like coursing through the plant world.
Yeah, thousands of plants.
Yeah. So I do find it plausible that there's some links between psychedelics. I think psychedelics have influenced cultural history at various points along the way. And one of those may have been to kind of nurture this religious impulse. But again, it can't